Building a brain organoid. That's a biological computer using living neurons instead of transistors. So this is very different to what most people are doing out there, not only because you've managed to create these neurons with stem cells, but you're actually training these neurons to behave a certain way. So tell us a little bit more about the basic premise of it, how it started and what it is you want to achieve.
Yes, so these are very many questions here, and so just to put these things in perspective first, doing brain organoids with the stem cells is not something outstanding. Okay, I'm very happy to do it. Okay, but you have thousands of researchers around the planet who are doing it. All right. Now, trying to make a computer out of it or something that is able to process information, this is much rarer. Okay, there are very few people working on this on the planet right now. And being able to train them successfully is something we are struggling with, okay, as all of the people on this planet. Okay, it's beginning to be a practice, which is the field of biocomputing. That means computing with biology, okay? And by the way, this falls into the general approach of biocomputing is anything that you can use in biology to compute, okay? Mm-hmm. And this itself falls into a larger category, which is unconventional computing approaches, and quantum computing is one of them, okay? So just to put even more perspective, all right? So, and the reason we came to this is that we wanted to have a different kind of AI, okay? And we realized that if we want to duplicate how the neurons are working in a digital manner, which is how AI is working today, but we want to make it more realistic, it's going to consume so much power, electric power, okay, that it's just impossible. Okay. So that means that if I wanted to simulate your brain, Velco, I would need a small nuclear plant.
Right. Maybe not for mine.
Yeah. Guaranteed. And I'm even not sure that with all this power, I would be able to simulate you in real time.
Right.
So just to put this in perspective, how efficient our brain is. I mean, if you consider a living neuron compared to an artificial neuron, which is what is running ChatGPT, for instance, there is about 1 million of difference of efficiency. And we shouldn't be, surprised by this, because what happened is that for the past 300 million years, nature has refined and evolved nervous tissue in order to be power efficient. So what we're seeing is 300 million years of refinement, okay? So yes. It's not 100 of electronic. So this just put also this perspective.
Yes, it's incredible. I mean, commercially, you've got a very attractive premise that is that the brain is a million times more energy efficient than its digital counterpart. So the AIs that are being built today. I've read somewhere that the brain consumes about 20 watts of power, right?
It's correct.
Yeah. So when you compare that to a nuclear plant, just to replace all the operations of the brain in one person, that's quite a dramatic premise. So obviously, this is one of your biggest and boldest claims, and I assume this is one of the points that have stuck the most with investors when it comes to capital raisings and things like that, right?
Yes. Yeah, but you're right. Okay, on one point. Okay. This is the boldest claim right now. I suspect that in 100 years from now, we will realize that the most important thing of biocomputing was not energy efficiency. And it was something else, which I don't know yet.
Yes.
No, there is a guy, he was called Mr. Shockley. Okay. About 80 years ago, he invented the solid state transistor. Okay. And today, the solid state transistor is used on the internet, on smartphones, etc. And you can be sure that this guy, who was so proud of his invention, could not think that the main application would not be to avoid bugs in lamp bulbs, which were the alternative to solid state transistors.
Yes,
So,
yes. Well, you're right. You don't know how it's going to be applied in the future, but the promise is huge. It's simply huge. I want to talk about the butterfly simulation for a little bit. It's quite impressive. I don't know the technicality behind it. I've read somewhere that you were training the neurons to behave in a certain way, like bribing them with dopamine, right? In order to create the right synaptic connections there.
yeah. So first thing, I love when I have this opportunity to talk with people like you, just to explain actually what we're doing. When people look on the internet about what FinalSpark is doing, there are a lot of people who are saying that we do incredible things, okay? But this is wrong.
Right.
We are not that incredible. Okay? So it's interesting to give me this opportunity. So indeed, with the butterfly, what we're doing, and you can see the video on YouTube. If you type butterfly FinalSpark, people will find it. What we're doing is that we are just simulating a 3D butterfly, okay, running on your browser. Okay, this is not outstanding itself, although it's a very nice butterfly. And you can actually control a lamp, okay, a light, and displace it in a 3D environment with your mouse. Still nothing outstanding, right? Now, what is interesting is that this butterfly, of this simulation of the butterfly, is randomly turning on itself, okay? And each time, by chance, he sees the light in this 3D environment, okay? Pure 3D simulation, okay? Nothing special. Each time he sees the light, he's going to send a signal to our neurons in vitro in Switzerland,
Right.
using the internet, okay? And he's going to do that every 200 milliseconds, 5 times per second, okay? Each time he sees the light. And if the neurons in Switzerland, in our lab, reply, then it's going to stop moving and go straight. Mm-hmm. Very basic algorithm, no training implied, okay? But the end result is you have, it's basically a butterfly that is going to be able to get to the light by interacting remotely with human neurons in real time.
So did you just say that the neurons don't actually direct the butterfly, but they tell it when to stop, right? Interesting. Now, the neurons, there's a lot of images on your website and online. It's a fairly small cluster, yes? You started with 10,000 neurons, I think, and physically it's about that big, right?
Well, it's half a millimeter of diameter, okay? Yes. So you can see that with it's possible to see with your eyes, with the naked eye. Okay?
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's visible. Okay. We've done some much bigger just a few weeks ago of several millimeters across. It may not be always interesting. The bit bigger is not
bigger is not always better, right? So
yeah. Consider with 10,000 neurons as sophisticated as those neurons, you can potentially do incredible things, okay? And we are not even trying to do with them incredible things, just basic things. We have plenty of power for what we want to train on, okay? But you're right that the size is a problem actually. If you want to grow in size, the problem that we have, and all researchers have, is we don't have any vascularization. That means that there is no way to get the nutrient inside. So as the result, the neurons inside, they die.
Right.
And so there is a full topic of research on how to bring nutrients inside our small brains.
How to feed them in a way, right? Because the brain, in the biological realm, lives as long as the body does. So I think the longest living brain is 120 years or around there. How do you feed them and how do you keep them alive? Is that one of the biggest challenges you're facing now?
Yes. No, one of the biggest, yes, you're right. So the thing is that for this, we rely on cell culture technologies, which are not new. They have been around for almost 1 century. Okay.
Right.
So, and what you use for this is basically water. Okay. So you put your neurons in water. Okay. And there are a number of things in addition to the water. There are amino acids, there are vitamins, there are salts, there are glucoses, and sometimes a few other things. And you make sure that this is 37 degree. You make sure that the air atmosphere is 5% CO2, which is 100 times more CO2 than in our atmosphere. Okay.
Okay.
And you have 80% humidity, and you change the medium regularly. And if you do all this, if you don't touch the brain organoids, we can get them to live for several years. However, in reality, not touching the brain organoids is useless because you have no interaction. So you have something that does something, but you don't know anything about it. And if you want to interact, one way to do it is using electrodes. This is what we do. If you start to touch them, then the lifespan is going to reduce dramatically from a few days to several months. With a lot of variability, like in biology, you have a lot of variability between the experiments. This is one of the challenges of biology.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. When you touch them, from a few years, you mean to several months?
Yeah, maximum.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Hopefully there's no,
days.
yeah. Hopefully there's no parallel between this and the likes of the Neuralink implants that get right into the brain tissue and obviously they're
Yeah, well,
yeah.
yeah. This is why I mean Neuralink. There is a link between what we're doing and Neuralink actually, because we are using also human neurons. Okay, and we are also using electrodes. Okay, and we want also to have signals from a very during a very long period of time and 24/7. This is one of the characteristics of what typically of what we are doing at FinalSpark is to be always on. So if
Always
you
on.
go on our website, any time of the day, you go in the live section, you will see our activity from our neurons 24/7, and we've been streaming this continuously 5 years. Okay. So these are common things, and there are a number of things which are opposed to this, which oppose to us, and the same for Neuralink. And one of the things, not only the death of the neurons, it's something else. It's too much life, okay, from another type of cell, which is also in our brain, which are called glial cells. Okay, there are only two types, okay, of cells, neurons and glial cells. So glial cells are here officially to support neurons in their activity. Okay, people will say they are the servants of neurons, but this is the old way of thinking, by the way. And people, more and more people believe that glial cells are way more important. But what is important here to remember is that when you start touching neurons, glial cells start to grow on the electrodes. And glial cells are not conducting electricity, let's say. Okay. So they are creating an insulator between your neurons and your electrodes. So as time go by, you will get less and less signal. And this is true for Neuralink and this is true for FinalSpark. And that doesn't mean it's dead, actually. We don't know, but we have no signal. And this is one of the definition of death today for human beings is you have no signals, but sometimes there are signals, but you cannot see it.
Question on the neurons that you create from stem cells, right? What
Yes.
happens to DNA and identity? Like if you use my skin cells to turn into stem cells and then create a little mini brain in a dish, is that Velco's brain?
Well, the DNA is unchanged. Okay, we use stem cells from a human, I don't know who actually, because they are used by many researchers on the planet. And it's always the same DNA and whatever we do with it. So whether in our case, in our lab, we create brain tissues, okay? But in our other labs, they will create other parts of the body, always with the same DNA.
Yes. But I mean, say if you use my skin cells as a starting point, as the source, will that be my brain you're growing in a dish in there?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I would do. And this is also for specialized medicine, very interesting application. Because if I use your skin cell to create induced pluripotent stem cells, okay, as you suggested, and then from these stem cells, I create again some neurons, they will have your DNA, Velco.
Right.
That means that they will have all the characteristics of your own neurons. That means that I can make experiments virtually on your own neurons without affecting you. So if I want to treat a disease, for instance, I can test the side effects. By the way, not only on your neurons, but any organ of your body without affecting you because before giving you the drug.
So theoretically, without putting a timeline on it, you can recreate someone's brain eventually.
Yeah. So it's very theoretical because one of the problems that we have is that the way the tissues are formed is, it's progressing spatially. Okay, so there is a whole history when a baby is created, and we are not replicating all this formation of organs. There are layers and layers creating the nervous tissue, and we don't simulate this whole process.
Right.
So we can hardly no do full brain is totally yeah. But however, what we can do and what we are doing actually is create different neurons from the different parts of your brain. Okay, so you have, for instance, cortical neurons, which are different from hippocampal neurons, okay, or striatal neurons, and we can create small organoids made of each of these type of neurons and connect them together. So creating what people call an assembloid, which is a collection of organoids connected together. Okay. Then with this, so it's certainly not a brain as in the usual acceptance of the term, but you start to have some bricks that could process information in a useful manner.
Very interesting. Intelligence. You talk about an alternative to traditional AI out there. How would you see this technology converge with silicon-based AI? Is that a channel where we could connect neurons to silicon-based AI using your approach versus the implants like Neuralink or Synchron?
So there is an ambiguity that I want to solve in your question before answering, okay?
Yes.
Are you talking about connecting directly neurons to silicon or to semiconductors or to processing information using digital processing? Processing information coming from neurons using digital processing.
Yes. And I'm going to go a step sideways just to explain the premise of my question, more into an anthropological zone rather than scientific. If you look at the likes of the traditional BCIs like Neuralink and Synchron and BlackRock Neurotech, 20, 30 years into the future, you can see that the sensors will eventually become redundant to a degree. All this flow of information between a very powerful AI and the human brain is suddenly open rather than restricted and bottlenecked by the sensors.
This now starts to be out of my natural expertise, okay? But just to put in perspective, if you interface directly with the LLM, for instance, the thing is that the LLM is fundamentally based on words, okay, and not concepts, okay, just literally words. So I'm just getting hardcore technical here, okay? Instead of having a bird view vision that you have, okay, voluntarily. And I just don't see how it's possible to interface at the world level, okay, so if we talk about LLM, the interaction would have to be this way. Now we can generalize and have a more abstract vision, say, okay, I interface in a manner, no matter, okay, how. And this manner of interaction with AI doesn't require any of the usual sense, okay? And of course, this could speed up the interaction, for instance, because our way of communicating right now is incredibly slow if we think about it. But I'm not sure I would think much faster, by the way. So,
Yeah. Well, you actually do. We think a lot faster than we speak, but yeah.
yeah, okay. And so now, what does brain organoids and the research that we do in biocomputing tells us about possible future interaction with AI? Um, I don't know. I don't know. I just out of my expertise, what I can, just being a technician. Okay, it's always easy to go on the technical part, because I know what I'm talking about. Um, we use already AI, surprisingly, and artificial neural networks to process, interact with biological neural networks, which is incredibly funny when you think about it. Okay. And one of the reasons is that the signals which are sent by neurons are so complicated and unpredictable that if you want to make something meaningful out of this mess, I would say, an artificial neural network is absolutely perfect. Okay. There are other mathematical tools, but this one is very, very good. So I think conceptually it's very interesting when people say, well, AI and this artificial neural networks is just a black box. Okay. And to some extent, that's very much true. Okay. But I would tell them, consider the brain organoids and biocomputing is an even darker box. Okay. And what we are doing right now is that we're connecting a black box to an even darker box. Okay. So we get to something we don't fully understand, to something we don't actually understand at all. Okay. And people could say, well, that's a problem. Okay. I would say that's the opposite. That's the solution. Okay. If you restrict what you do to what you fully understand, we just restrict what you do.
Yes. Yes. Good point. Biocomputing, do you see it becoming a big thing in the future?
Yeah.
Commercialized, available?
It's going to be a new industry. There will be a boom here, like there was a boom in digital before. It's going to change the whole industry.
Well, and you think it's driven by the premise of obviously the energy efficiency, but also the neural nets that are being modeled now, they're kind of like a copy of the way the brain works, whereas you're really copying a brain, you're creating a brain. So do you think there's other efficiencies other than the energy premise there?
Yeah, as I said, many people suspect that there are all kind of advantages to have a system which is built like us when we interact with it. Okay, and but there is no science behind this statement. Okay, there's just intuition that is going to be perfectly adapted to us human beings. And if you think larger, I'm not even sure that, right now our product is going to be a server, like Amazon Web Services, biocomputer, a nervous tissue of 100 meters by 100 meters by 10 centimeters. Okay, 100 billions of neurons. Okay, serving millions of customers 24/7. And this consumes 100 times less than any digital server. Right. But imagine tomorrow you can have, I don't know, thinking objects. Today, if you look around in where you're sitting right now, okay, you have other artificial objects which are not living. Okay, all living objects. If you have a cat, there is some plant or things like it. Okay, there is no in between. Nobody has never thought about it in between. Okay, but you could have a glass of water, for instance, that could feature a nervous tissue that would sense what you exhale and introduce in the water what is good for you. So a kind of bidirectional interaction. So it's a new way to see technology, which is a technology which is not only bio-inspired. It's more than bio-inspired.
Right.
It's bio-designed, actually. It's just sitting in between, just perfectly integrated. It's a perfectly, so far there's been, technology almost opposed to human beings. There has not been really a tentative to just go in between. This is what we are offering here. What I see here, a few long term.
That's very interesting because, if you look at history, you're right, technology has been kind of separate to human beings. developing at its own pace, and now we're trying to integrate it in a way with AI and BCIs and all of that. I think that's because we've historically we've kind of been very focused on the physical, the whole Newtonian approach to science, and we try and solve all these physical problems, which there's a big need for, bigger buildings, and we're building rockets and all of that stuff. But I feel like now we're starting to face inwards, and we're looking at the brain, and we're looking at behavior and realizing that, okay, there's physical aspects to it. There's like biochemical reactions, but it all happens in the brain. So I feel like we're coming not away from that sort of physical development of technology, but into a merge between the physical and the neural, the soft matter and the hard matter, if you would. So which is why the work you're doing is super interesting, because it's a bridge between the two. You still use electrodes and you still depend on technology, but it's actually a biological design that's been proven for tens of thousands of years. So it's a super interesting point on the timeline, I would say.
Yeah, I fully agree. This has been a profound and very slow evolution of science, I would say, this past 30 years, that you can find also in the media. When I was a kid, there was a series of Steve Austin. I don't know if you know. This was the guy who is worth $3 billion. Okay. This guy was basically dead and it was entirely rebuilt with artificial things. And this was the image of the future. And 30 years ago, we are talking about mechanical heart, okay, things like this, on nanomachine, nanotechnology that would go in your blood and things like that. Okay, so very machine oriented. Okay. But what do we see today? I hear that basically, if you have a vaccine, for instance, these are not nanotechnologies. Okay, they are just using existing, I would say, life process for our own benefits. Okay, and now we talk about transplant of heart. Okay, of coming from bovine or from animals, for instance, or coming from organoids. All right, so going biology again. And if you think about it, the success of AI somehow demonstrate the interest of being bio-inspired, because this was
Indeed.
fully bio-inspired, okay? And this is not the only case. There are genetic algorithms which are in bio-inspired. So in some way, I think now more and more people tend to realize that after all, maybe there is more than just copying. Okay, we've been copying, okay, but normally, if we were really good engineers, we shouldn't have to be bio-inspired. Okay, but but we are not that good engineers. So and now instead of just copying, maybe we can just reuse. This is the next step. This is the kind of things that we are doing actually here. When you do biocomputing, you reuse. We are not only bio-inspired. We just use the living.
Yes,
Awesome.
yes. Cool. You had proof of concept in some form. How does it map out over 10, 20 years? I'm sure it's very difficult to predict, but if you had certain goalposts, what would they be?
So what we intend to have is in 12 years to have this server available for the public. So people, and this ideally this should be transparent for users. Okay, they would use, I don't know, ChatGPT or another generative AI functionality, and that wouldn't make any difference. Apart from they would pay much less.
Getting there, what sort of challenges do you see beyond the research part of it? Ethical roadblocks, regulatory roadblocks, anything else?
So you say beyond the technological challenges, which it's hard to think beyond the technological barriers, but you're right. I think the ethical part is I take it extremely seriously. I've been sensitized to this from the very beginning by discussing with people like you who were challenging me on the ethical part. And I just realized from the early beginning that I'm not competent. Okay. Again, this falls totally outside of my field of expertise. Okay. But there are people here who have been studying ethics and philosophy for years. Actually, this is their expertise. Okay. There is a full academic world around on this. Okay. And so what we we started this 2 years ago to start relationships with philosophers and eticians said, hey guys, here is what we do. Think about it. We'll bring you as much information as you need, okay? And just start to think what would be the consequence, what are the limits, what we should care about. Start some thinking about this because it's a new challenge, and I think society has to be ready for this
Yes.
in some way, or to have to adapt to what is acceptable or not at some time, some point in time. I don't know. Okay. So, but, and you talk about regulations. Okay. Regulations will come far later. Okay. When politicians will have noticed what we are doing, because this is just hardcore deep tech that they are not informed about it. They just don't see this in the
Yeah.
visor right now. But philosophers are very open. So there are already some publications that you can find which have been done since the beginning of the year about what we are doing, okay, and biocomputing in general, okay. And we are setting up a new collaboration, so with the UK right now, with some universities, and we think there will be other or more formal collaboration with philosophers by the end of the year.
Yes, interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think ethics obviously is best when it's applied in the lab with a little bit of foresight, because, like you said, with things like regulation, that comes way later, and it's not necessarily a good thing that it comes later. I think some of these questions need to be raised as early as now, so they kind of, regulation and innovation goes in parallel. I think that's going to speed things up in a good way with the right guardrails, rather than innovate first, then put the handbrake up and wait and wait and wait and then go. Starting the right conversations is super important now, but also having some sort of an ethical goalpost as a part of within the lab, as a part of innovation, is also fairly important. So, we've seen this in 2 decades ago with big tech and what it's done to psychology and people's self-worth and all the platforms like Instagram and stuff. Those guys just kind of like innovated, let it loose, and then slowly we are seeing all of these red flags pop up, in people's mental health. I think it would have been a better approach to have an ethicist in-house, to develop it, not slower, but develop it better, develop it for the better. So I think we can build on that and learn from that and shape regulation alongside innovation. I think that will be like the ideal bird's eye view, to use your phrase that you used earlier.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. Yeah, that would be the ideal. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Now, scaling what you do. How do we scale it? Where do we scale it to? Is it a matter of going from 10,000 neurons to 100,000 neurons?
So I was talking about vascularization, okay, but this can be solved. I see no reason that it cannot be solved. The proof is that it's solved here.
Yeah.
And we can scale virtually infinitely. Okay, it's not the case with our head, which has a finite size, as we noticed. But with nervous tissue, I would say almost in open air, as we are doing, okay, could build billions and billions of neurons, okay? Just to realize, when we do cell culture in our lab, the lab is just below here, okay? We have to stop the multiplication of neurons, not to have too many.
Mm-hmm.
So we stop the process voluntarily, okay? And we stop normally, we stop at several millions, 10 millions, 20 millions, and we stop, okay, we have enough, okay. And, but we could very well industrialize this and have a full factory creating very big nervous tissue. One of the concern is also the connections. Okay? If you have a very big tissue, that's very good, but you have to use it. Okay, so we have also to design a cheap way to have billions of points of contacts. Okay,
Sorry, a cheap way in what sense?
not expensive.
Right.
Consider right now, when you have electrodes, they are going to cost hundreds of dollars, okay? And you can have, 100, 1,000 electrodes, okay? But if you build a factory, you need billions and billions of electrodes.
Mm.
So it has to be affordable, okay? But this is not by itself a challenge neither, okay? We have to make sure that we have no contamination. Okay. This can be solved. This has been solved in many other industries in biotech, right? So these are all the answers around scaling that you ask. Okay. So I would say scaling, I'd see that as an engineering problem, not easy. Okay. Challenging, but can be done. And we can more or less see in how many times we need for it. What is particularly challenging is something before this, is mastering training of the neurons. So training, in an artificial neural network like AI, training is key. And it's the same for biological neurons. There is no difference, okay? If you got a bunch of connected neurons, randomly, they will do a random job, which is useless by definition. You just need to change the weight of the connections. In the case of artificial neurons, it's just numbers in a tensor, in the matrix, okay, on a GPU. In the case of biological network, these are synapses. And you don't access and read synapses as easy as with the numbers in a GPU.
And that's where neurotransmitters like dopamine come in as a part of the training, right?
Yeah. So here is a bet, okay? Because I tell you, at this point, nobody really knows how to train these things, okay? It's like 30 years ago with artificial neural networks. Nobody really knew how to train them, okay? And when people discovered how to train them, then there was a revolution. So one bet is to say, well, listen, instead of trying to discover a way to train the neurons, I'm going to bet that the mechanisms for training them is already wired, is already there. It's in there. Okay. Somehow it's a reasonable bet in the sense that you and I are able to learn. And this is based on the neuroplasticity, that is the capability of the connections to change over time in order to succeed in a given task. Okay. So now, how do you elicit this training process? How do you make it start working? One of the things is dopamine inside, which is a very known neuromodulators with modulator implied in the learning process. There are a lot of work in vivo showing this. So the idea is we are in vitro, not in vivo. So we are not in the animal or the human being. We are purely on glass, okay, on dish, yeah, right. But we can assume that there are some similarities, okay, in the behavior of those neurons. So indeed, we are going to, for instance, start to reward the neurons with dopamine each time they do well. Okay. So now when I say the sentence reward with dopamine, there is something which is very simple and something which is very complicated in this sentence. What is very simple is to find a way to deliver dopamine. Simple in theory, okay, in practical there are a number of problems, but in theory it's very simple to deliver dopamine. You buy it, you put it in the medium, it's done. Okay. But now I say reward with dopamine. So the word reward, what does that mean? What is a reward? Okay, I can deliver dopamine, but there is no proof that this is going to be considered as a reward by the neurons, and that therefore they will change their behavior in order to reproduce their last behavior, which led to the reward. So what is a reward? What is fundamentally a reward? And this has been debated in vivo for the past 30 years, and not in vitro. Nobody knows about it. Okay. And even in vivo, it's not clear. Okay. So one of the things that we know is that several parts of the brain are implied. For instance, the striatum is implied. So if the striatum is implied, that means that we would need maybe an organoid of striatum that would be able to collect the reward or the dopamine to generate a reward that will be transmitted to cortical neurons. And then you start to get an assembly, with two types of organoids which are interacting. One is receiving the dopamine and passing the message to the other. So just this is the kind of directions that we are doing.
I mean, listening to you speak about this is basically you're talking about recreating a brain and a body in a way. It's brain primarily, but we are recreating those connections and the reward mechanisms from scratch, really.
Yeah, you should know that the reward approach. So there are not so many approaches right now for training. Okay, this is the reward approach by neuromodulators. Well, I think the only one doing this right now. Okay, and there are not only there are also serotonin, glutamate, and other types of neurotransmitters but there are also other ways to reward. Which we are not using much, but I think for for the listener, it's good that they know about it. It's called the freedom energy principle from Professor Friston, whose states, and this is a statement, okay, that if you stimulate electrically, for instance, regularly some neurons, predictably, and this is a key word, they will consider this as a reward. And if you stimulate them randomly, they will consider this as a punishment. So there is no clear in vivo demonstration of this principle, okay? But there are theoretical considerations which I have some difficulties to understand, but not because they are wrong, but because I'm not smart enough. So it's a problem of me, not of the theory. So this is another direction. So and those two directions, freedom energy principle or neuromodulators, are both based on so-called closed loop approach. A closed loop is you do something, you have a result, you act on the system by rewarding and punishing, and you do it again. And you do this to train a dog, for instance, works very fine. Works the same for a kid, works also for us. Okay, where or another, there is a closed loop. You have to see the result and have an impact on what you are in order to be. And there are some other approach which are more random based, which can be also, people don't say random, they say stochastic approach, where you stimulate randomly and you hope that it's going to progressively improve the behavior that you get. It's also a closed loop approach, but by random stimulation.
Yes. Interesting. Now, the competitive landscape for what you do, what does that look like?
I'm going to surprise you, okay, by saying something that normally CEO never say, okay?
Right.
I will tell you there is not enough competitors. Okay, it's a very surprising statement, but it is the case. Right now, I think there are two very newcomers who arrived in the past few months. I think one in UK, one on the West Coast. There is, of course, Cortical Labs in Australia,
Yes.
the most well known. There is also Koniku in the US, and that's all. Okay, good. Okay, so 5 companies. But I tell there are not enough competitors, and the reason I say this is that when I talk to venture capitalist investors, okay, basically they are afraid by the novelty of the thing. They're just afraid. But if they talk with a startup doing fusion, for instance, okay, and fusion, it's also quite science fiction, okay? Quantum computers, which is also quite science fiction, okay? And there are many, many competitors. They invest into quantum computers. They invest into fusion, okay? So deep tech VCs, okay, only deep tech. So I think what is lacking here is the competition. But I'm very happy to be among the first ones because the IP landscapes, I mean the patent landscape, is basically empty, which is wonderful.
Well, it's a very interesting position to be in, as long as you've got the urge to innovate without competition and the urgency, as well as the urge.
Yeah.
Yes, that's cool. So, just want to ask you. This is my favorite part of any interview I do, and this is where I will ask you to stop being technical and stop being a scientist. Just want to dive deep into the future. I want to ask you about a future where neuroorganoids transform daily life and transform industries in a commercial sense, What excites you the most about that?
Well, I think this is what you were saying before about blending between technologies and living things. And this is, I mean, historically, living organisms are always being associated with some sort of primitive way of interaction. Okay, and here we could have sophisticated interactions with living things. And I say things, there will be still things, but they will be living. Okay, and this is going to deeply transform the whole society.
Mhm. Could we imagine a situation where in the average person's daily life, there's a biocomputer in some capacity? Can you paint an everyday scene maybe so that my readers can visualize the potential of this technology?
I don't know because this is pure science fiction now. Okay, so I don't know. There is something I could do. I don't know if that makes sense for you, but because I was discussing one of my daughter is very young, but she's a sort of graphic designer. Okay, and she made a movie recently when she tries to describe a bit a universe where some of the solar panels, okay, normally these are really silicon-based hardcore tech, and she is designing a universe when people have flowers which are actually living but are able to collect light and transform it into electricity. Okay, and she made sort of movie around this animated movie, and this is the kind of futuristic things which is on the opposite of the dystopian world people describe today about the future. Okay, I very much believe in a very positive future with the successful.
Yes, amazing. I think I may have lost the audio at the end. Let me just double check. You can still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay, you're back. No, that's amazing. And hopefully we'll get to that future sooner rather than later. I think we're at the cusp of this super fast pace of innovation at the moment. It's only going to accelerate from here. So when you converge traditional science with AI, with computing and glimpses of quantum and biocomputing, when they all converge at a certain point, I think we're going to see some explosive developments.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. This is accelerating. I see this, and because we use AI also in our research, we are automating some process using AI and LLM for research itself. So everything is accelerating.
Yes. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of topics. I noted one thing down that I may use as a headline, which I loved. You said factory of neural tissue. It's kind of like a factory of brains. And the futurist in me is super excited by statements like that. So hopefully we'll get to see that factory out and operating within decades. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm positive about this. There are something I wanted to say about very funny experiment that was made by artists in Zurich, in Switzerland, a few weeks ago. You can find a video online. It's basically a sort of painting, okay, like elastic surface. When you put your hands, you press it. When you press it, it sends a signal to our neurons in the brain, and then the shape of the painting changes. So there is with the activity coming from. So you actually interact with your hands and you feel the response of the neurons.
Like a pushback or something.
Yeah. On an elastic surface. It was very interesting.
That's really cool. Is this in a gallery at the moment, like a public space? Yes.
It was, but the gallery has closed now. It was finished, but there is the video is available online. If you send an email to Evelina, she can tell you.
Yeah, great. Will do. Okay, yeah. Amazing. Thank you, Fred. It's been great chatting.
Thanks for this opportunity. It was very cool.